All right, so it's officially signed. You got the rematch, Golovkin, Canelo, and there's so much controversy from the first fight to all the, the failed testing and all the outside stuff that postponed the original date for the second fight. And so much has happened to this point that anything is possible going into the second fight. I don't discount anything. I believe that when it comes to Golovkin, he understands the politics. When it comes to boxing, obviously, he has to understand the politics involved, unless you're living brain dead, right? Somebody like him in his position would have to know from their first experience and maybe even fights before that, some of the fights that he wasn't able to get done at middleweight. So here's the situation, right? The situation is Golovkin is going to gamble on himself, understanding that the politics cannot be favoring him going into this fight. Now things might change, right? Things might change. Like obviously one thing has changed, and that is the percentages of the money. We understand that there's going to be a increase for Golovkin, right? 42.5 versus, what was it, 35% going into the second fight. And I believe the first fight, he got 30%. Maybe I'm making a mistake on that by a few percentages, I don't know. But so obviously there's an increase for Golovkin. That tells me that with all the bullshit that has gone on with Golovkin, Canelo, especially Canelo de la Hoya on their side, right? With all the bullshit that they've been pulling with the failed test, with the judges scoring the fight ridiculously in favor of Canelo, with all the demands that they've asked for, that the money is it's worth it to Golovkin. And so he's willing to take that risk, right? I know some people think that, he's basically selling his belts. Well, I don't think he's a willing participant in that. What I believe is that he understands the situation from dealing with it the first time and all the other stuff that happened before they even stepped in the ring until now. So I look at it as Golovkin understands the politics are not in his favor. They would want Canelo to win. They will try their best to see if Canelo can win the fight, and that it's basically up to Golovkin to shut that down. And because of the money, it makes it worth it to him. I think that Golovkin is done with the, with the trying to unify the belts. I think he saw how that situation played out and doesn't really care about it at this point. He's 36 years old, so obviously he won't be fighting for that many years. So he's looking for all the big money fights, and I can't personally blame him. When it comes to Canelo, Canelo has a lot to prove. I think that their motto, the Canelo motto, is to try to get the win any way they can, by hook or crook. But he definitely has a lot to prove. All right, so Saturday night, you have Errol Spence Jr. to defend his IBF welterweight strap versus Ocampo. And I don't know much about Ocampo other than he's undefeated and from Mexico, and basically he's had all his fights in Mexico. So this is the first time he'll be fighting the States. Obviously, you can tell by this picture he's a couple of inches taller than Spence, so that might make him the bigger man come fight night. But does he have the skills and what it takes to beat Errol Spence? Is this really much of a test for Spence at this point of his career? We'll find out. I'm not gonna talk shit about Ocampo because, to be honest with you, I haven't watched any videos. I haven't even watched any fights. I'm more interested in Errol Spence and see, what he does at this stage. Fighting in Dallas, fighting in front of a pretty big crowd. I think it's somewhere around 15,000 spectators will be there. So, you know, good for him, and see how he performs in front of his hometown crowd. Does he get overwhelmed, or does he, you know, breeze through a guy who may not be on his level? I'm betting that more likely this guy's not on his level, but again, I don't really know much about Ocampo, so I'm not gonna comment too much, other than I just want to see Errol Spence Jr. fight. I find him to be incredibly entertaining, a fighter who's getting better. Obviously still has flaws and still has a lot of great potentials about him. I think that's what makes him a interesting fighter to watch. So yeah, I will be watching because of Errol Spence. Don't know much about Ocampos. There's a lot of talk obviously of Terrence Crawford, who moved up to welterweight, and whether or not him and Errol Spence are the fight in the future. I believe that that's what, again, mainstream media, just like they do with Canelo, Triple G, Wilder, Anthony Joshua, I think this is going to be the next fight that they're going to push as a fight that needs to happen now. It's mainstream. More than likely it will go mainstream, you know, and I think a lot of it would have to do with what Errol Spence does on Saturday night. I think that he will come in and impress in front of his crowd, in front of his hometown, where he's from, and score a, you know, vicious knockout, stoppage of some kind of way. Will there be some A-side bullshit? Yeah, I think so. But I think he'll get the job done. And in my opinion, Errol Spence is definitely an exciting fighter to watch. That's my video. Peace.